Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're just going to be reading some scary Appalachian mountain stories. I found these all on Reddit, so you can also go read them there, but let's get into it. Night in the Appalachians. So my girlfriend and her friends invited me to stay at a small cabin Airbnb in the Appalachian Mountains near Seven Devils. The idea was just to go up there to enjoy some snow tubing and then some light drinking, hot tub, and board games in the cabin afterwards. So the cabin was pretty high up in the mountains, and the drive up to it was kind of scary. Single car length road for the most part, no railings on the side of the road. So if you were on the side of the truck, which we'd rented a 4WD to make the drive up, thank goodness, it was a sheer drop on that side. Sure, if we drove off the road, we'd likely be stopped by some trees on the way down, but still a bit nerve-wracking. Another thing was some of the trees on the trail had faces on them for decoration. I think they were supposed to look cute, but they just looked kinda unnerving for most of us. I really should have taken pictures, but was just too anxious during the climb. The cabin itself was almost at the top of the mountain and fairly small. A small living room with a very tiny and narrow kitchen and 2 bedrooms. Hot tub on the lower porch because the cabin itself was basically on the second floor, so you had to go up a stairway to get into it. The key to the cabin was in a lockbox, so no special door lock option, just an old-fashioned cabin. We came back after snow tubing and dinner. The others drank enough to get buzzed, whilst I only had a glass of wine since I have a condition that makes it dangerous to get too much alcohol in my system, so I was relatively sober. We enjoyed the hot tub as planned, witnessed a beautiful shooting star, then played board games after that until around 1 a.m, and then we all went to bed. I woke up a little after 4 a.m. because I was suddenly sweating, and then I felt kinda unsettled. I decided I need to go to the bathroom, so I got up, I left the bedroom, and nothing seemed amiss, so I used the bathroom. When I left the bathroom, the front door was wide open. Naturally, I felt pretty uneasy. But again, this was a small cabin, so there was nowhere for any intruder to hide. I could easily see the entire interior of the cabin from the tiny hallway. I decided maybe the last person through the door last night after the hot tub didn't fully close the door and lock it appropriately, because there is a sign by the door that says, "Close door firmly," and it was fairly windy outside. I mean, the wind was howling out there. So I go over to the door and close it, making sure that it's firmly enough in the doorway to fully lock it. I even jiggle the handle a few times to try to see if it'll open when locked. It doesn't budge, so I start to head back to the room. Then I hear the door rattle a little bit, and I turn around and stare at it. I watch the lock itself turn, and then the door opens, and it doesn't slam open from the wind, it just slowly swung open. I stayed extremely still, because of course that was crazy. The door has a huge clear window on it with no curtains and a big window beside it that also doesn't have curtains, and there was absolutely no one on the other side of it. There's no way someone could have ducked out of view either and hurried away from the door after pushing it open either, because they would have had to make a lot of noise hurrying down the steps to get off the walkway. Like I said, it was an old-fashioned door as well with a simple lock and knob. No electronic buttons or anything to unlock or lock by buttons or remotely. After getting the nerve to close the door again and locking it firmly, nothing else happened that night. I couldn't really go back to sleep because I was just too scared to do so. The following morning, I told the others about it, and they were pretty spooked too, but otherwise glad we were only staying that one night. Before we packed up the truck to leave, there was a strange knock noise coming from the surrounding woods. Not like someone knocking on a wall or door. It was a deep, hollow-sounding knock that only knocked twice, stopped for a while, and then would do it again. Maybe it was just trees knocking together, but after what happened early in the morning like that, it was a little unsettling. So yeah, I'm from Florida, and though I've experienced other paranormal activity before, that was the most physical thing I've experienced before, and I've definitely heard plenty of stories about old occurrences in the Appalachians. In a way, I'm glad I experienced something, but I'll never forget the fear I felt. After all, my first thought was an intruder or something, and it would have been pretty bad being up there so high by ourselves. If we'd had any reason to run, we could have easily fallen off a cliff or something in the pitch black darkness outside. So, pretty creepy story from this user. There were a lot of comments that people left. People are suspecting that it might have been something called a spear finger. I'm not really sure why people are saying it might be a spear finger. A spear finger is believed to just be like a terrible monster that lives in the mountains, and what would happen is they would come to your door, they stab people, and then scoop out their insides. So it's quite a scary monster. The other thing that people believed was that Spearfinger could actually change their appearance to look like your grandmother or your mother, so it was like a shapeshifter of some sorts. There was none of that really in the story, so I'm not sure why people are suspecting it's a Spearfinger. But anyways, maybe they picked up on something that I didn't. And other people are saying that it might have just been like Native American spirits living in the woods trying to just, cause some chaos, which I think that's probably the most plausible explanation, just because she couldn't see anyone outside of the cabin and there was lots of windows. So yeah, probably Native American spirit or Spearfinger. We won't know. Let's move on to the next one. Strange feeling in Appalachia. I've always been an avid mountain person. When people say they go to beach for vacation, I respect it, but I prefer the mountains 100%. Something about these old giants has always fascinated me, as if I just cannot avoid but to be drawn towards them and be in awe when hiking on them. Over my short life, I'm a 21-year-old student, I consider that I've seen a fair amount of mountain ranges in Europe, from the Alps in Switzerland to the Pyrenees in Spain, and from the Italian Dolomites to the Czech Stolo Mountains. I've always hiked and camped outdoors a lot with family and friends, but also by myself. Now, I went to the United States for college, and I've always been tempted to do part of the Appalachian Trail. From the pictures I saw on the internet, I always wanted to see them in person. And not going to lie, I must say that the great amount of scary stories of these mountains always attracted me a little bit as well. I'm definitely not a person who likes scary movies or anything, but I enjoy reading fellow mountaineer experiences, and to be honest, I mostly just read stories about the AT to know how to prep myself for when I was going to do it, AT being Appalachian Trail. The scary stories just got my attention every now and a while. That being said, I decided to go this year and do a small part of the Appalachian Trail. I went to do a small part between the borders of Tennessee and North Carolina, with Clingman's Dome being the icing on the cake. I was a little bit hesitant to go by myself since I'm not very familiar with both the geography as well as the wildlife parts of the states. I wanted to go with a friend or my girlfriend who is from North Carolina herself, but both my friend and my girlfriend declined because they had to work. I was on spring break. So I decided I just had to go by myself since I'm graduating this year and will return back to Europe. I started at this place called Bryson City and walked along the Tuckasegee River until I reached the Noland Creek trailhead. From there on, I just followed the trail until I would reach Clingman's Dome, and from Clingman's Dome, I would follow the AT for about a week. I had prepared well for this trip. I carried bear spray and pepper spray, and I also brought this hunting knife and axe for wood. I had some canned food and lots of water, plus a water filter, and for the rest, just my tent and sleeping bag. So when I started walking away from Bryson City and I saw the beautiful aura this mountain range had, I couldn't be happier. I had been wanting to do this since I had arrived here in the US, and I was finally doing it. I encountered some people on the Noland Creek trailhead who were friendly, but I had made up my mind that I would be better off alone than with strangers. I reached Clingman's Dome the same day and went a little further before I would set camp. It was beautiful. At night, I slept a bit off the trail with a small campfire while I had dinner, and which I put out before I went to sleep. The first night went super well, as I was also exhausted from the hike to Clingman's Dome. The next 2 days were just as beautiful, and I saw lots of breathtaking views. The people on the AT I encountered were super polite as well. Then, on the third night, I feel like everything took a strange turn. I had set up my camp just as usual, around 160 feet from the trail. No one was camping close to me, or at least not that I was aware of. While getting dinner, I just had this super weird gut feeling that I was not alone there. It felt like as if someone was looking at me from behind a tree or something. I just tried to convince myself that I was having an amazing time and that I was safe, and that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I went to sleep and put out the fire as usual. Then, before it was daylight again, I woke up. I woke up with the same gut feeling that even though I was in my tent, someone was watching my tent from a distance. I did not hear a single bird, which was weird, because right before daylight is when they start chirping again. I only heard the wind in the leaves. It made me feel uncomfortable, a bit scared even. I didn't fall asleep again, and first thing in the morning after having breakfast in my tent, I broke up camp and decided to continue my hike. During my hike, I encountered a few people, and again, they were very nice, but I stick to myself. While walking on this part of the trail by myself alone, I felt like I was being observed again. I even had a feeling as if something or someone was following me. So every now and then, I would stop dead in my tracks in order to hear if it was real. Now obviously, my mind could be playing tricks, but I would swear that I heard the steps stop a second after I had stopped. So according to me, at that moment, someone was following me. I looked around me the whole time and I never saw someone or something, which made it even more weird. After a long day of hiking, I made camp, this time closer to the trail than usual, because for some reason I thought it would be more safe. I again had this gut feeling of being watched while having dinner outside my tent. So I decided to finish it up in my tent and I went to the bathroom in a bottle because I did not want to go outside now. I tried to sleep by closing my eyes, but my mind just focused on hearing the whole time. And that is when I heard it for the first time. A knock, as if a branch was hitting a tree, or a small rock was getting thrown at a tree. Silence followed, for what seemed like an eternity, but probably only 10 minutes. Then again, this time way more clear. I was scared now and had no idea where to go since it was dark already. I put on my flashlight in the tent and made myself as big as I could, so that my shadow outside the tent would look bigger because of the light. I don't know why this was my reasoning at the time, I just thought of bears, and I held my hunting knife in my hand. The silence had followed the second knock, but now I shouted to pierce the silence in the dark. First I shouted that whoever was joking around, I was armed and I was not wanting to be pranked. I thought this would scare them off. It didn't. It was almost as if this person found it even more funny, knowing I was pissed at them. I heard another knock, and immediately after a knock on what I assumed to be the opposite side from my tent. So now I was guessing it was 2 people instead of 1, and that they liked to pull a prank on an innocent passerby. I tried to stay up as long as I could, but around 4 a.m. my eyes just gave up and I dwelled off. I woke up around 8 a.m. again, with the light of the sun being my savior. I first tried to hear if whoever was pranking me was still knocking. I did not hear anything. I shouted again, stating that I was now going to exit my tent with my knife in my hand, and that whoever had been joking around should make themselves known. I walked out of my tent, and I didn't see anyone. I looked for tracks around my camp, but could not immediately make something out of it. I decided to get the hell out of there. The next part of my week basically continued being the same. At night I'd hear some knocks from different directions, and occasionally I heard what I would guess was a little bit of humming, like as if a person was just humming a tune. Now, I never saw anyone except from the occasional hikers on the AT, so I cannot say I saw something weird, but I never shook off this weird gut feeling of being observed and followed the rest of my hike on the AT. That one was pretty creepy. I don't know what I would do if I was hiking all alone and I had to experience something like that. It's terrifying. Lots of people in the comments are saying that they think it's Bigfoot. It must be Bigfoot because Bigfoot is known to make these knocking noises to make himself known. People are saying that tree knock and pacing behaviors like up and down your tent are behavior from juvenile Bigfoots. They're also saying that the spooky feeling of being watched and also the fact that the woods were completely silent when you woke up with no birds chirping is classic Bigfoot encounter behavior. And I know that also sounds pretty crazy, but I think people are just finding reasonings behind these creepy events happening. Let's move on to the next one. Growing up in the Appalachian Mountains. I could give you a million times as a kid and young adult, I felt scared or paranoid playing in the woods. It's a beautiful place and I spent my entire childhood getting lost out there by myself or with friends. As kids, we never got too far out there, but you could actually see the progression of us venturing further and further out as we got older because of forts and carvings we would leave. This one particular time, like 1,000 times before, my friend and I had just graduated high school. It was our last summer of freedom and we spent the entire summer camping and hiking out there. We had decided to find a new place to set up camp and walked for what felt like a few miles before we came to a nice clearing. The area was relatively new to both of us. We got the camp set up and fire going, and the plan was to wait until nightfall, smoke some weed, and play Monopoly. For the sake of backstory, my buddy is a smaller, real goofy guy, but comes from a family of foresters and always had a deep understanding of all trees and different plants you come across. He had no fear of going and camping out by himself. If I spent 10,000 hours in the woods, he probably spent 50,000. As for me, I'm a taller, sturdier guy, and as we got older, I spent more time worried about women and sports, and the woods became a place for small parties. Also, I never had the balls to camp out alone. In fact, older me wouldn't go far at all when I was alone, because I could never shake the feeling of being watched, which was just paranoia, but still an uneasy feeling. Anyways, camp is set, fire is going, but it's getting a little lower and needs wood. The sun is down and we're both cutting up and having a good time. My friend is sitting on this little chair he always brought and loading up this makeshift bong, and I was crouched breaking some excess limbs off some of the logs we had gathered for the fire. All of a sudden, the strong breeze cuts through the clearing. I couldn't tell you if it was the suddenness of it or what, but my friend and I both stopped immediately and looked at each other. The breeze went just long enough to flicker our fire down to a small flame. We both sat completely still in almost total darkness. Neither of us said a word. Across from us, on the other side of the fire, we could hear footsteps. They sounded like somebody was running and would slow to a walk and then run again, definitely on two legs. By the sound of it, they were pacing back and forth over the same spot. Then, just like it started, it stopped with a softer crunch on the underbrush. I knew by the sound of it, it had taken a crouch. I was crouched still and knew that I was staring right back at it in the dark. My friend grabbed my shoulder and said, "Buddy," and when he did, I felt this surge of fear come over me. I could feel it and hear it in him. I'd been so fixed on the footsteps and rationalizing what I heard that I hadn't even considered being afraid. But this was true fear. It was raw and made me feel helpless. I could hear my friend after a while grab some leaves and he dropped them on the fire. For a split second, the leaves covered the fire. We were in pure darkness. Then the fire sprang to life. We both quickly grabbed more leaves and brush and threw it on the fire. I got some sticks and logs on there, and neither of us took our eyes off the spot or moved much for over an hour. Finally, the leaves crunched and it slowly walked off. Whatever it was had sat crouched, watching us without moving, for far longer than any animal would. It wasn't until after the footsteps disappeared that I realized the smell had disappeared as well. It smelled like a paper mill, spoiled eggs almost. For the rest of the night, besides whispered remarks, neither of us really moved or stopped looking at the spot. Nobody went into the tent, and I had very short light sleep, sitting on the ground with my head rested on my hands. My friend never went to sleep. In the morning we packed up and silently walked back home. To this day, we talk about it. In the 7 to 8 years since it happened, my forester friend has not camped by himself out there since. So that is also terrifying. I don't know what I would do in that situation, but by the sounds of it, I think it probably was just a person. If they're just pacing back and forth and they can hear them crouching down and watching them, then I think that is just probably normal human behavior. I don't know, maybe there was some cult in the woods and they were just seeing if these people were some sort of a threat. Then again, it could also be Bigfoot. People were saying in the previous story that Bigfoot loves to pace up and down and also makes knocking noises, so that's also possible. Other people are also commenting on the story saying that they think it must be a brown bear because they throw off that paper mill scent and like a sulfurish smell, and bears can actually crouch down and sit down exactly like that. So maybe the bear was seeing if these people were some sort of threat, and then maybe when the fire sort of lit up again, that scared him off. That could be very possible as well. Other things that people are saying is that it might just be like a spirit, a really evil spirit or a demon, because of that sulfurish, disgusting smell that usually follows evil spirits. I think it was probably just a human crouching down to watch them, or a bear. I think those are the two most plausible explanations, especially because the bears have that sulfur smell. Cool, so let's move on to the last one. I had a terrifying encounter in the Appalachian Mountains, and I'm looking for answers. Let me start by saying I have lived in the Appalachian Mountains all my life and have experienced a lot of strange things. My family was Irish and settled in WV, but I currently live in the North Carolina portion of these wonderful mountains. That being said, I've learned a lot about what really lurks in these dark woods, but this was like nothing I had ever experienced before. It all began with my golden retriever Ozzy growling like I'd never heard before. He literally never growls, so that had me really uncomfortable, but this growl was bone-chilling. It was like he was getting ready to have a fight for his life or something. I took both him and my other dog out at around 11 p.m. and he would not leave my side. I noticed that my workshop door was open, so I walked down to close and lock it up. The entire time, he is still glued to my side. Ozzy also kept trying to get in between my legs, still growling, and all of his hair was sticking straight up like a feral animal. The second I closed the door, all hell breaks loose in the woods. It sounded like 50 full-grown men had broken out into a full sprint, tearing through the woods. Trees were shaking and branches were falling. In my life, I have never ever been that scared. We got back into the house before I shit my pants and I got my pistol mag light to figure out what the hell was out there. When the dog and I got back outside, we were surrounded by what sounded like people mumbling. It was everywhere. I shined the light all over the woods and couldn't see anything, but the sound was coming from all around. It sounded as if you got a full gym of people to baby mumble. You could almost make out words. That's why I don't think it was an animal. I almost immediately felt sick, like I was having a mix between a panic attack and a full swing of the flu. Back inside the house, it sounded like people were walking around all night. The windows were creaking and you could clearly hear the sounds of shoes on gravel. The mumbling never stopped. Every time I got up to check the house, my feet would touch the floor and it would get dead silence. You could hear birds, crickets, frogs, or anything. I was terrified and didn't sleep a wink. The air felt thick and evil all night, and that's the only way I could explain the feeling. Imagine a soaking wet quilt being tossed over you. That's how I felt. I'm looking for any answers as to what happened. So to me, this sounds like a creepy ass human cult that just decided to maybe put a curse on the house or decided that these people were now in their territory since they've grown so much or something. But no, I think this one definitely would have freaked me out the most, especially because dogs sense things that we can't sense, and if my dog was growling like that, I would be terrified. Anyways, people are saying that this sounds a lot like a Sasquatch encounter, which is very interesting. Juvenile Sasquatches are known to travel in packs, and they were probably just a little bit curious at night. Maybe they were out hunting and they came across this house, and because he stepped out of his house to go close the door, maybe they thought, oh, you've interrupted our little hunter gathering party, and decided to just make some noise and cause some chaos and make it known that they were there. That's what people are saying. People are saying it sounds like stories they hear on Sasquatch Chronicles. So lots of people have experienced a similar thing, and people are just saying that it's probably a Sasquatch or a pack of Sasquatches. Some people were also saying that this person might have just been dealing with a very upset forest spirit. They commented that the spirit might have just been a bit angered and a bit restless, and they did the right thing by just going inside their house and hiding and keeping quiet until the spirit just kind of calms down. The mumbling is the thing that's getting me though. Like, I still think it's probably a group of people chanting something, because no one mentioned that a Sasquatch or a forest spirit would sound like someone or group of people were mumbling. So the mumbling thing, I think, is what separates it from all the encounters that people are describing in the comments. But I guess we'll never truly know what it is. We can only assume. And there you have it. There are some really scary stories from the Appalachian Mountains. I find these stories so interesting. If you do too, let me know, because I would love to read more of them. And let me know if you like this kind of content, if you like this kind of video format, and don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you are into scary content. And other than that, I will see you next week for a new video. Bye!